Okay, so I need to sit you down for a second, because something happened at Raiders camp today that I genuinely did not see coming, and I've been watching this team closely all summer. There's a name that almost nobody was talking about back in April. Nobody. It wasn't in the mock drafts people cared about. It wasn't trending. And in the span of about 24 hours, that name has completely hijacked the storyline coming out of Vegas. Let me walk you through exactly how this unfolded, because once you hear the details, you'll understand why I dropped everything to talk about it. We're 2 practices into pads at camp, and the wide receiver room has been flipped on its head. I want to start here because by the time this summer is over, I think we might look back at this as the moment everything changed for that position group. The name is Malik Benson. Write it down because you're going to hear it constantly for the next few weeks. According to Ryan McFadden, who's been charting every rep at practice, the current top of the depth chart at receiver looks like this. Tree Tucker, Jalen Naylor, and then Benson, right there with the starters. And who's sitting behind that trio? Jack Beck and Dante Thornton. 2 second-year guys who were supposed to be taking that classic sophomore leap this offseason. Instead, they're watching a rookie who cost the franchise nothing more than a 6th-round pick climb right past them. Just pause on that. A late day 3 selection is currently outperforming 2 former draft investments who walked in with real expectations attached. That's the kind of development that can genuinely reshape how a franchise builds an entire position room. And here's what makes this even bigger. Trey Tucker is playing out the final year of his rookie contract, and there's a real scenario where the Raiders let him walk next spring. So if Benson keeps stacking good days like this one, we're not just talking camp buzz anymore. We could be watching the first crack in a full changing of the guard at wide receiver. I want to be careful. 6 practices is nothing over a full season, but when a storyline is staring you in the face like this, you don't look away. You dig in. Now let's talk about Jack Beck, because honestly, this next part stings a little to say out loud. Coming out of the spring, Beck was a guy a lot of us, myself included, were legitimately excited about. But somewhere between Naylor's arrival and Kubiak taking over as play caller, the momentum quietly shifted away from him. I remember a reporter saying it bluntly on a podcast weeks back, that Beck simply hadn't separated from the pack. Now we're watching that exact concern materialize in real time, with a 6th-round rookie physically beating him for reps on the practice field. I'm not ready to write Beck off. Camp is a marathon, and if Tucker eventually walks or Naylor hits a setback, there's still a runway for him. But right now, it's fair to be uneasy. Getting passed by a day 3 pick this early is not the narrative anybody wanted for him. Let's step back from Beck for a second, because there was a lot to be excited about today. Ryan Fannin reported that the receiver room as a whole had its best practice of the entire camp, and not by a small margin. Naylor hauled in a couple of red zone touchdowns, and from everything being described, the chemistry between quarterback Fernando Mendoza and Malik Benson was clicking in a way that jumps off the page even in written reports. Think about why that detail carries so much weight, because this is foundational stuff. Every truly elite quarterback eventually finds that one receiver who just gets it. Burrow has Chase, Mahomes had Tyreek, Brady leaned on Welker for years. You need a guy who reads the exact same picture the quarterback is reading, someone who adjusts his route the instant a defense shows something different before the snap. Brock Bowers is always going to be Mendoza's security blanket. That's not changing anytime soon. But if Benson develops into that trusted second option, understanding leverage, reading coverage rotation, knowing what his quarterback needs before Mendoza even signals it, that raises the ceiling on this entire offense. That's not hype talk. That's just how modern passing games are built at a high level. And it wasn't only the touchdowns. A reporter named Joshua, also on the ground at camp, described Benson going one-on-one against cornerback Jamin McCoy, snapping off a sharp cut and simply leaving him behind. McCoy had no answer. Sit with the weight of that rep. If a 6th-round rookie is winning matchups against a corner people inside the building genuinely believe could develop into a top-tier player, that's not luck. That's real talent showing up live. This is exactly the storyline camp exists to produce. You want your day 3 picks flashing something nobody expected. Think back to Greedy Vance last year, an undrafted free agent who carved out a real role and is still on this roster. Now Benson is chasing that same path, and if he keeps developing this way, there's a real chance he becomes a long-term piece of this offense, not just a body fighting for the 53rd spot. But I have to give you the flip side of that same session, because it matters. Joshua also noted McCoy turned right back around and beat Beck clean in a different one-on-one, breaking up the pass with no room for argument. Benson beats McCoy, McCoy beats Beck. 2 data points, same practice, telling a pretty consistent story about where each guy sits right now. And this is where I have to bring up something genuinely going to sting if Beck can't turn things around. Go back to the draft. John Spytek took Beck over Luther Burden when Burden was sitting right there on the board 1 or 2 picks later. And from everything being said right now, Burden might end up being the best offensive weapon on the entire Bears roster, ahead of players who went top 10 overall. We'll see if that holds up once real football starts. But the perception hanging over that draft decision right now is not kind. I do want to add some balance here, because it's easy to get swept up after one electric practice. Before today, multiple reports out of camp had been fairly critical of this receiver room. So, is today the real turning point, or one outlier day against a defense still installing its scheme? I don't have that answer yet. Beating the same defenders every day in practice builds a comfort level that doesn't always survive first contact with a new opponent on a Sunday. All right, let's pivot to the defense, because there was a genuinely telling development in how the staff is grouping their defensive backs. Sam Warren reported that Jeremy Chin, Taron Johnson, and Greedy Vance spent the day running a tackling circuit alongside the linebackers, while Isaiah Polamau and the other deep safety types worked off to the side with the quarterbacks and cornerback group. Here's why that grouping caught my attention. When a staff puts specific players through tackling drills next to the linebackers, that's a strong signal about where they intend to line those guys up. Chin, Johnson, and Vance are all going to be operating close to the line, in the phone booth, where the game moves fastest. You want your most instinctive, most physical defenders playing downhill, and Chin in particular is built exactly for that. Now flip that. The guys training with the quarterbacks, the deep safety types, that tells you they're going to be playing on top of the defense, roaming free, reading the quarterback's eyes from 25-30 yards off the ball. And this is where I want to circle back to something I've been saying since Camp Buzz first started building. Trayvon Stokes fits best as a deep, rangy free safety, not a slot corner squeezed into a tighter role. His ball skills are legitimate, and if the Raiders let him play free on top of this defense, I think you're looking at a player who could realistically pick off 4, 5, 6 passes this season. Every one of those turnovers is a possession stolen straight out of the opponent's hands. Isaiah Polamau lining up in that same deep grouping tells you something too, since he's never really operated in a true box safety role under Leonard. This isn't a coincidence, it's a plan crystallizing in front of us. Chin and the slot corners handle the close quarters work near the line. Polamau and the free safety types handle range and takeaways over the top. Now let's shift to the offensive line, because there's a lot happening up front too. DJ Glaze reportedly had a strong day, doing a noticeably better job managing Max Crosby and holding the edge on multiple run plays. Keep in mind, yesterday's reports on Glaze were not kind at all, so bouncing back against arguably the best pass rusher on the roster is a meaningful signal. Here's my honest take on Glaze. I think he's one of the true wild cards on this roster, right up there with rookie defensive tackle Tonka Hemingway. There's a real school of thought that Charles Grant might eventually be the better long-term option at tackle. But the best outcome isn't Grant beating Glaze out, it's Glaze developing into a legitimately good starter, forcing the Raiders to find Grant a role elsewhere, whether that's kicking inside to guard or serving as depth. Am I fully convinced Glaze holds this job all season? Not yet. I want to see it translate once real football starts. But real credit has to go to the coaching change up front. Last year's offensive line coaching, frankly, wasn't NFL caliber. That coach had no business running a professional line room, and from what's been reported, that job had more to do with a personal relationship to the previous head coach than actual pedigree. That stunted the growth of these young linemen last season. This year is different. Rick Dennison is a respected, accomplished offensive line coach, and I expect a real jump from Glaze, Grant, Caleb Rogers, and Jackson Powers Johnson. Speaking of Dennison, he sat down with reporters today, and a handful of his comments carry more weight than people might realize. On Glaze, he pointed to his natural length, his ability to use his arms effectively, and the work he's putting in to keep sharpening his technique. On Powers Johnson, Dennison described him as genuinely receptive, someone who takes a coaching point and applies it immediately, correcting his own mistakes without needing to be told twice. Exactly what you want to hear about a young interior lineman anchoring that group for years to come. And then there's Colton Miller. Dennison said Miller looks like himself again, more patient, more comfortable working the edge. His story doesn't get the attention it deserves. Back in 2022, he got hurt and played through it, dragging down the tail end of that season. No surgery followed. The issue lingered into the next year, and he finally had the procedure, costing him an entire offseason heading into 2024. He fought through a rough start before flipping a switch at midseason and playing elite football down the stretch. Then in 2025, with a real full offseason for the first time in years, the early tape was some of the best I'd seen from him. and then an unrelated ankle injury derailed things again. So when Dennison says Miller looks like himself, that carries real weight. If he can stay healthy with an actual full offseason behind him, there's a legitimate chance he puts together a monster season. The talent was never the question with Kolton Miller. It's always been health lining up with opportunity. One more moment from today that made me smile. Rookie Tonka Hemingway reportedly put Caleb Rogers through what was described as a spin cycle in a one-on-one pass rush drill, and Rogers was visibly furious afterward, yelling in frustration after getting beat clean. I love that reaction. I love a competitor who hates losing reps. Even in August, that fire separates guys who plateau from guys who keep grinding. To be fair to Rogers, one-on-one pass rush drills are stacked in the defender's favor. Everybody knows it's a designated pass rep, there's no run threat to respect, and linemen key off the first movement rather than the snap count. So Hemingway had a built-in edge. But still, getting beaten that clean tells you the rookie is doing something right this early. That ties into a broader theme I keep coming back to. Guys like Benson and Hemingway, this is exactly the production you hope for out of your day 3 picks. Nobody drafts a 6th or 4th rounder expecting a cornerstone. But every year, a handful of these late picks outperform their slot completely. And right now, both Benson and Hemingway are trending toward being exactly those surprises. Now let's close out at the cornerback room because I got some real information here that I want to correct myself on. Yesterday, going purely off secondhand reports, I told you Darian Porter looked like he was struggling. But I made it a point today to track down someone I trust who's actually on the ground at Raiders camp instead of just relying on headlines. Here's what he told me directly. Eric Stokes is clearly and firmly the CB1 on this roster. No real competition for that spot. But outside of Stokes, nobody has locked down a starting job yet. His read has the corner going by masses as the current frontrunner, but he genuinely believes Jamin McCoy might end up being the best cornerback on this entire roster, purely based on movement skills and footwork. That's a massive statement if it holds up. Remember McCoy's backstory. Before his injury, the range of outcomes projected on him was as wide as it gets in this league. Worst case, that injury ends his career before it starts. Best case, he's a legitimate top 5 cornerback in the NFL. That wasn't empty hype. That was a grounded evaluation off actual tape. If he'd been draft eligible after just his 2nd college season, people were talking about him as a realistic top 10 pick. The injury and the extra year on campus cost him serious draft stock. And here we are, watching him quietly rack up one-on-one wins against receivers like Benson in live reps. As for Darian Porter, my source told me he isn't doing anything drastically different or worse than the rest of the pack competing for that CB2 job. Consider that a direct correction from what I told you yesterday. He also mentioned Cameron Riordan hasn't separated himself from Porter either. It's still a genuinely open competition. But if he had to bet today, his money is on Masses winning that job, partly because of scheme fit. He's noticed defensive coordinator Robbie Leonard likes to bring pressure often, and in a defense that figures to blitz frequently, a corner who thrives in press man coverage becomes that much more valuable. I do want to add a disclaimer here because it's something I think about with camp reporting. All of this, whether it's Sam Warren's updates or reporters tracking individual reps, is filtered through their own football knowledge and their own read of what they're seeing. We don't have the tape yet, so a lot of what we're doing, myself included, is reading tea leaves. Genuinely useful, but hold it with the right perspective. These storylines reshuffle once real preseason football starts, and we can watch the tape ourselves. Cameron Riordan getting first-team reps today matters too. That tells me the staff is deliberately trying to figure out who their actual CB2 is going to be opposite Stokes, rotating bodies through to get an honest look at game speed. Quarterback Aiden O'Connell also picked off his first pass of camp in a 7-on-7 period, though that looked more like a coverage bust from the tight end than an elite read from the quarterback. Still, a takeaway is a takeaway on defense, and I'll take these small wins as they come. So, here's where I land after today. This Raiders team has real intrigue at nearly every level of the roster. A 6th-round receiver forcing his way into the top 3 at his position. A young quarterback building real chemistry with that same rookie. A secondary being deliberately sorted by role, with a potential CB1 caliber talent hiding one spot behind Eric Stokes. An offensive line that finally has credible coaching behind it after a lost year. And a rookie defensive tackle already making veteran linemen lose their composure in one-on-one drills. We're still just a couple of days from the first preseason game, and once these guys strap it on against a different team, in different jerseys, running different concepts against players they haven't seen every day for weeks, a lot of these camp storylines either get validated or reshuffled overnight. I'll be tracking every one of these threads closely because this is exactly the stretch of the calendar where rosters actually get built, where roles get defined, and where the guys who show up in big moments this fall usually start proving it right here, in practices most people aren't even watching yet.